With the immediate success of The Loud House in its early years, it's no surprise that it would eventually get a feature-length film. Not quite theatrical. Unless your name is SpongeBob SquarePants, that ship has sailed long ago. But a Netflix deal is definitely the next best thing. Fans absolutely love it. Non-fans and former fans think it's deliberately boring at best, or an atrocity and a trash fire at worst. Thus, most tend to brush it off. But does it deserve this reputation? It makes me sad to see how widespread this is. The movie actually served as my introduction to the series alongside Nickelodeon All-Star Brawl, so it holds a special place. So what makes this movie so special, especially for those who are already invested in Lincoln's story? If it's one thing that stands out from the get-go, it has to be the movie's art direction. You've probably seen that one meme about cartoon movie art and all the fancy shading it gets, and that couldn't be more true here. Just look at this lighting on the shot of the house at the beginning, or the contrast on light sources in dim environments. And let's not forget the beautiful multi-layering effects or that impressive 3D panning and depth of field. It has a sort of Karl Barks' Uncle Scrooge feel, which is both very cool and fitting to the setting. You'd never see something like this on the main show. Nick really bumped up the budget for this one. And the effects of said budget would extend into the music department too. The movie presents itself as a musical, and while the show has experimented with this before, we'd get more substantial and fleshed out tracks this time around as opposed to the short tidbits we saw in the character songs. This movie serves as a sort of microcosm to the transitional era as a whole, taking place between seasons 4 and 5. Much of this can be owed to its long development time. The film has a very dicey production history, having been in development as far back as mid-season 2. The idea to have the Louds visit relatives in Scotland was an idea Chris Savino had for a regular episode, and while he ultimately didn't work on the film, he did approve his concept's use for it. Other Savino-era elements make an appearance in the earlier parts of the movie. It even pulls Flip's Season 1 design, which is definitely an oddball choice. But as the film goes on, we see Rubiner-era hallmarks take the stage, which includes one of the film's biggest points of contention, the fantasy elements. Dragons and magic are now explicitly canon in the Loud House universe. And while the dislike toward these ideas absolutely makes sense, the movie handles it way better than the later episodes of the show. Even here it's described that these things are extremely rare and are confined to the Loch Loud setting. It's not like dragons became an integral and well-known part of their universe. Lynn even doubts their existence altogether. Others have even managed to make a successful integration of dragons into an otherwise realistic setting. So we cut to the movie's intro, a nice little scene of Royal Woods a couple decades back, where we follow a young Lynn Sr. dancing his way down the street to the tune of Life is Better Loud. We're treated to some interesting cameos, depicting a younger Flip, Mr. Grouse, and what is likely the moment where Lynn and Kotaro met. Also, alongside them is Molly of all characters, who's sometimes used as an incidental, but at this point she wasn't even conceived. What's she doing here? Another cool little detail is the various references to other Nick properties that we see on both this video store and Mr. Grouse's newspaper, all of which makes sense as well, given that this seemingly takes place during the late 90s. But something that really stands out is their attention to continuity. CoverGirls and Ella's for Love go into detail about how Lynn and Rita first met, and they hit all of the key points here. Rita used to be a crossing guard, she slipped love notes into Lynn's pocket, they had their first date at Bangers and Mosh, it's all here. So they tie the knot, and we get a cute little montage of each sibling joining the family one by one. We get some extra focus on Lincoln's little segment, and we get to see how much his siblings care about him, even back then. As for the rest of the siblings, a couple of inaccuracies do pop up. Not Allowed depicted baby Lori with a couple of odd deformities that would disappear as she aged, which are completely absent here. And the movie shows that Luna was a rock and roll girl from birth, while we learned back at Four Bros About to Rock that she didn't adopt that identity until middle school, which is a shame, but ultimately isn't a big deal. Though I do love how Lynn's hairline starts receding with every sibling born. That's a fun and clever little detail. As we make our way back to the present, we get a scene of an early Saturday morning where Lincoln is giving Lily a presentation. It's a very show-don't-tell method of introducing Lincoln's character to newcomers, and we see his ingenuity and leadership skills in full display right from the get-go. In this case, it's breakfast burrito morning, and Lincoln's teaching her how to beat the sibling rush to get her hands on them. The two have a lot of chemistry in this scene, evident that they share a close bond. Back in Any Given Sunday, we see how much of the two are on the same wavelength, and it's nice to see those ideas continue in the movie. The sisters, of course, catch on to Lincoln's plan and are determined to get to the table themselves, but the duo shows some in-the-moment ingenuity, and when things go south again, Lily takes Lincoln's advice of always having a backup plan. Lincoln's really rubbed off on her, and it shows throughout this movie. It's probably why so many depictions of an older Lily in fan art have her taking on some of Lincoln's interests. And while we're on that, another thing that's worth talking about is the movie's laser focus on the family. Lincoln, of course, is the plot's main driver, and to a lesser extent Lily and Lucy as well. A common complaint from those who dropped the series by this point is that the side characters supposedly took too much focus away from the main cast. If you're one of those people, you'll be happy to hear that most of the side characters barely get anything in this movie. Flip only gets a couple of silent cameos, Scooch just gets 3 short lines, Mr. Grouse only appears during the flashback, and Lincoln's friends are completely absent aside from Clyde. Being a microcosm of Season 4, we get a Casa Grande scene tacked on with Bobby and Ronnie Ann, but that's just to set up this brick joke at the end. No impact on the plot. Now, for something that will impact the plot, we learn that all of the Loud Sisters have activities that day, and Lynn and Rita are losing their minds as they had no awareness of any of this. Lincoln takes charge of the situation and plans an efficient route to get through all of the activities smoothly, as well as having the girls' necessary supplies on hand before they leave. Kinda like what we saw with Lincoln earlier, this is a lightning round of getting to know the sisters and their key interests. A quick introduction for newcomers, kinda like the World of Pokemon segments from that franchise's movies. Now, the one thing about this segment as a whole that doesn't make sense is that all of the girls participate in competitions. I know that this is supposed to be set up for the motivation behind the movie's premise, but it's inconsistent. Some of these make sense. Lori's golf tournament, Lynn's sports, Lola's pageants, even Lucy, who mentions participating in grave digging competitions and a grave mistake. But others don't participate in contests at all. Lenny's definitely the most notable example, while Lana's depicted as being part of Bobby Fletcher's pit crew, something she herself stated that Lana would have to wait until she was 18 to join. Some other inconsistencies during this scene involve some odd character use choices, like Luna's bandmates being missing while Sam is in the audience, like who are these two? Or the knockoff Bertrand and Haiku sitting on the podium here. The movie wasn't produced at the Loud House's usual studio, and I know the Moongoats weren't totally a unit yet during the movie's production, but these bootlegs look pretty bad. Anyway, once the montage ends, the family stops at Lynn's table to celebrate, and an exhausted Lynn and Rita thank Lincoln for always keeping things running. They head inside, and Lynn wants to take a picture of everyone holding up their trophies. Through some poorly timed slapstick, Lincoln ends up being carried out of the restaurant and locked out, with nobody noticing that he's even missing. He feels upset about the situation, and goes on to sing a song about how he feels overlooked and overshadowed by his siblings. This ultimately sets up Lincoln's motivation throughout the film, and this premise is one of the key complaints some viewers have with the plot. I do agree that it's a little contrived how the Loud Sisters are suddenly these town-wide celebrities with billboards and such. While it kinda makes sense for Lola, everyone in the family is well known, at least to a degree. But the main complaint is that Lincoln never felt overshadowed in the show itself, outside of making the case where this seems to take cues from. Why does he suddenly feel this way now? I think it all comes down to timing. Remember that he just dealt with a similar situation in the infamous Kings of the Con. Sure, he and Clyde weren't exactly saints there, but his sisters were getting all of the fame for being characters that Lincoln ultimately created, while the boys were forced to clean up after the cat. Combine that with the situation that day, and it probably put things into a really depressing perspective for him. A thick skin is not impenetrable after all. And speaking of Lola, we have another sign of a long development time. Would a season 4+ Lola really push Lincoln out of a photo like this? You know, the one who's her pageant coach, who saved her from a yearbook disaster, who taught her how to read? I'm not saying that they can't ever butt heads or have conflicts, but that was a dick move. Regardless, Lincoln makes his way to Clyde's house, who attempts to cheer him up by reminding him of some of his cool, if minor, accomplishments. Lincoln questions how Clyde can relate, given that he's won walls of awards for his baking skills. Clyde talks about how he and his Nana Gail have ancestors that were famous chefs themselves, and that a natural talent for baking is in his blood. Which is cool, Clyde comes from a long line of chefs. Except for the fact that he's adopted, while Nana Gail is Harold's mom, despite the fact that Clyde looks just like both of them. So none of this makes any sense. Anyway, this gives Lincoln some real inspiration, and he sets for home in a much better mood. So we see that struggling to share one bathroom is still a point of contention in the family. Looks like Lynn and Rita never rebuilt their closet bathroom after it got flooded. Lincoln, amongst the mess, asks the family where their ancestors originate from, and Lynn Sr.'s unsure about the origin of his, so after a humorously roundabout way of getting a spit sample from him, Lisa reveals that his side of the family originates from Scotland. They agree to take a vacation despite the cost, and we get to see the old change jug again from Tripped and Sweet and Sour. Only a single coin is left inside. Lola apparently took all of it to pay for her teeth polishing. You know, this is the same sibling that's often depicted as being unrealistically rich from pageant winnings. Only 15 minutes into the movie and Lola's track record already sucks. Thankfully, Lincoln's got a plan to get the family to their ancestral home. Through a montage of cheap plane rides, roundabouts in Europe, and even a trip in a cramped submarine, Lincoln navigates the family's odyssey, earning him praise from his siblings when they finally arrive, and everyone is in awe of Scotland's beauty. Lynn Sr. wastes no time embracing his Scottish heritage. The Louds wander around town for a bit and introduce themselves to one of the locals. Lenny shows some of her trademark ditziness, calling everyone that passes by Scott, but meets a boy actually named Scott, one that she gets to have some cute moments with throughout the movie as they share their kindness and awkwardness. Meanwhile, the local they introduce themselves to runs up to inform a man named Angus of the Louds' arrival, which has him in disbelief. The family quickly accumulates an audience, culminating in Angus coming forth with a big reveal. The town they ended up in is called Loch, both named after and founded by the family's ancestors from the 1600s. He breaks into song, showing them around town and how they've waited a long time for their founding family to return. Notice how the townsfolk are depicted as being unusually helpless without them around. Apparently, they can't even sweep their own chimneys. He then brings them to their ancestral castle, where we're introduced to Morag, the castle's caretaker, and one look at the Louds has her horrified. These two newcomers will be the other major players in this movie's story. Something that makes them particularly interesting is that they each represent different aspects of Lincoln's character. Angus, the castle's humble groundskeeper, takes on his positive qualities. He's very kind, altruistic, optimistic, willing to take others under his wing, just like we saw with Lincoln and Lily earlier. He's basically the definition of a cool uncle, which actually fits his character very well. He's voiced by David Tennant, who also voices Scrooge McDuck, and they even have very similar catchphrases. Morag, meanwhile, follows his negative qualities, many of which he's been completely outgrowing. She's very selfish and resentful, and regularly shows abrasive behavior towards Angus, even if his optimism often brushes it off. She's also got his logical side, but without the morals, knowing how to manipulate others in order to get what she wants. Though you can kind of feel for her in one aspect, she too is very put upon by the antics of the Loud family, and is a frequent slapstick victim, so you can see where some of that resentment comes from. As the family settles into the castle, we're given a look at what the Loud's 1600 ancestors looked like, and not too surprisingly, they heavily resemble the family of today. Even Rita, who's only allowed by marriage. Still, the Louds are undoubtedly Scottish royalty. Regardless, the similarities between the two result in Lincoln's fear that the family history he worked so hard to find was just a repeat of his current situation, and Angus's intuition seems to sense this. After the girls give Lincoln a tour of their very spacious new rooms, Angus informs him that the most special of all Louds was his identical ancestor, the Duke, and that Lincoln will be staying in his room. The Duke was a valiant figure who exhibited his descendants' undying altruism. This immediately reignites Lincoln's self-confidence, and he embraces the role, aspiring to follow in his ancestors' footsteps. Meanwhile, Lana and Lynn take an interest in the celebration of dragons throughout Loch Loud, and Angus tells them about how they're part of the Loch's history, including an egg that the royal family's previous dragon left behind. Angus takes them to the castle's dragon hideaway, and after 400 years, this egg finally hatches. Lily names this dragon Leela, and since Leela is female, it's fitting that her name follows the Loud sister naming scheme. So we head back inside and we see Lincoln proudly donning the Duke's outfit, making a fancy strut down the front steps. His siblings make fun of him for it, but Leela recognizes his spirit right away, so he doesn't let it get the better of him. Lynn Sr. cooks up a big feast, and while Morag is clearly agitated by the chaos, Angus is joyed to have the Loch feeling complete again. And as things calm down, he encourages Lincoln to pursue the Duke's lifestyle. Morag, of course, is having none of this, as it means that the Louds would be staying for good, and as we see many times, she's all too happy to remind people the family is only staying in town for a week. We also get this cute little scene of Lily feeding Leela under the dinner table, and just how fast these baby dragons are able to grow. Now for another one of those controversial fantasy elements. Late that night, Lucy desires to meet an ancestor, and we get to see her summon a ghost for the very first time. Cut to the family waking up and getting introduced to Lucille Loud, who mentions that it's nice to finally be home after 400 years. And this isn't just some throwaway line about visiting from the afterlife. Morag makes a notable slip of the tongue earlier that the Louds were driven away forcefully. They didn't simply leave on their own accord. And the next morning, she revealed that her ancestor Aggie was the one to do it. For the sake of her own peace and quiet, which isn't exactly the strongest motive, but still makes sense for a clearly rude and resentful character like her descendants. So Lincoln wakes up the next morning feeling refreshed and motivated to take on the duties of the Duke. Initially, he makes it all about himself, and paints Loch Loud in his personal image. Angus's looks of concern throughout all this really hit the point home. But a quick verse from him is all that it takes to remind Lincoln of his true character. Being the Duke is about altruism, helping others. That's how you live like a Loud. Of course, taking this to heart, he proceeds to lead the change in getting the town fixed up and making the people's lives better. Some may say he's being out of character here and that the quick turnaround feels a little cheap, but in this case, he's simply a kid caught up in the moment. He's getting his chance at being in the spotlight and wants to live it, even if he needed a little nudge back in the right direction. Though, I will say that I could definitely see the concern over him defacing a building. Either way, with the way things went, it ultimately makes him popular with the town, and they support his claim to being the Duke. All he needs to do is convince his family to move to Loch Loud. So, out comes the suit and slideshow. While he puts on a good performance, his family ultimately sees through his motives, while Rita mentions the lives and relationships that they'd be leaving behind. But in the moment, he has an ace up his sleeve, mentioning their one bathroom situation at home. This instantly changes their tune. During his slideshow, we get a little montage of random Loud family activities in town. One thing I will say is that it was definitely a missed opportunity not to show Laurie playing golf. Scotland is the birthplace of the sport. You'd think she'd be excited to give it a go with the Scottish Lynx. Anyway, we cut to the grand coronation. Everyone's gathered at the castle, and Lincoln is happy to see his family show support for him. Morag gives a little speech about the Loud's departure and formally crowns Lincoln as the new Duke, showing hesitance and reluctance in both. It's odd that Angus's intuition didn't kick in, though it was likely his optimism, believing that Morag will eventually come around. We also get the first instance of our heroes suspecting foul play in the ancestor's departure, Lucille being in disbelief as she eavesdrops on Morag's speech. But for now, cue the celebration. We're treated to a fun new version of the theme song with bagpipes mixed in with the typical rock and roll, appropriately titled Loud Castle. Life in Loud Castle is glorious. They even nod to the opening with Lincoln proudly sliding down the majestic spiral staircase. Lincoln is really enjoying his time in the spotlight, and we see how happy both he and his family are. A real zero-to-hero moment for him. Not so much for Morag, though. She's finally lost it. Dragging herself through the mud, she uncovers Aggie's old journal, which contains a magical gem with the ability to control the minds of dragons. Cut back to the castle, and Lucy gets her chance to move the plot forward. Not quite a B-plot, but an important point nonetheless. Lucille mentions that the same journal kept all sorts of records of what happened in the castle, one they might want to get their hands on for confirmation, and the pieces start to fall into place. The Louds did try to return, but Lolo, their own dragon, turned them away. She was the Loch's guardian and gets to decide the worthiness of the ruling family, so they had no choice. Unbeknownst to them, Aggie was controlling her with the gem, the latter feeling remorse once coming to and disappearing for good after leaving Leela's egg behind. Now, the movie doesn't explain what happened to the Louds after their supposed banishment, but David Needham, the movie's director, would later state online that they would settle down in Michigan in what would eventually become Royal Woods. It's where the royal came from. Though you'd think they'd teach this important bit of history in their schools. Morag promptly gets a villain song about her grand ambitions to follow in Aggie's footsteps and drive her own Louds away. Overhearing one of Lincoln's phone conversations, Clyde casually mentions that Lincoln isn't in his sister's shadow anymore, the thing that would ultimately be the key to her success. Like mentioned earlier, she represents Lincoln's ability to manipulate others for his own benefit, but she takes this to a very devious extreme. Step 1. Subtly encourage the Loud sisters to perform in town, resulting in a parallel to their near celebrity status. Strike right at the heart of Lincoln's insecurities and break his confidence. Step 2. Pretend to befriend Lincoln and suggest an act that will build back his confidence, flying through town on the now grown-up Leela in order to upstage his sisters. Finally, Step 3. Use the Dragonstone to take control of Leela behind the scenes and cause town-wide destruction, turning the town against their new duke and pushing him and his family to leave. And it goes without a hitch. Lincoln is absolutely racked with guilt and scurries back to the castle to hide in his room. The rest of the family shows up to console him, and in resonance with the show's themes, no matter what happens, they love each other and are always there. They even agree to help him rebuild the town once things have calmed down. And as for the townsfolk, as Angus put it, if it's one thing I know about our people, is that they don't keep a grudge. Sadly, his optimism fails him again, and the Louds head for home with their heads low. Morag immediately seizes this moment of instability, burning the evidence in Aggie's diary while committing to a takeover of the Loch, crowning herself as Duchess under the guise that it was the Louds' desire, and to much fanfare of the citizens. Angus is forced to crown her in ceremony, but his more passive and optimistic nature finally breaks, pushing back against Morag's takeover and exposing her lies to the populace. As everyone turns hostile, she enacts a hostile takeover herself, calling in a fully grown and thoroughly brainwashed Leela as her big stick, forcing everyone in line. In the end, Morag got everything she wanted, and then some. Fortunately though, Lucille recovers the diary before it's lost to the flames, intercepting the Loud's frigate and informing them of the true nature of the situation. Who knew Lucy of all characters indirectly saved the day? Now, Lincoln shows great regret for letting Morag fool him and manipulate his feelings, but even on a situation of this scale, he shows his true character, heading back to the Loch to fix his mistake. It's been a part of his character all the way since Season 1, but here it shows how far he's come. In the early days, he'd have to utterly embarrass himself or drag himself down in the process, but through his own ambition, these solutions became more and more dignified and mature as time went on, and now it gives him a chance to be the hero he's always wanted to be. It's Lincoln at his core. You're always helping us, now we're going to help you. The siblings and Lucille return just as Angus is leading a mass evacuation of the town amongst the hostilities. He's relieved to have them back, but laments that it's likely too late. But Loud ingenuity kicks in, and to get that scepter back, they need to feed Morag's biggest weakness, her temper. After what she did to him with his confidence, Lincoln is about to give her a taste of her own medicine. A furious Morag confronts the family with Leela, but with Lincoln leading the charge, the girls give her a blast of what she hates most. It's this moment that shows how high the stakes have gotten. Unusual for the Loud House, but definitely appropriate for a big epic movie. She nearly kills Lucy twice right then and there. But thankfully, it's the distraction needed to allow Lincoln to board Leela and make a beeline for the scepter. The two wrestle for control, and the ensuing scuffle hurls them right into the walls of Loud Castle. Angus and the family finally catch up with Link, only for Morag to corner them. And believe it or not, she was truly about to kill them in that moment, and was only stopped when Lincoln threatened to have the crown incinerated. She proceeds to drive Lincoln toward the nearby cliff in an attempt to recover the crown, and it's here that we really see the contrast of their characters. He tells her that tyranny and coercion are not the way to get what you want. Being self-serving and self-serving alone isn't the way to get what you want. Sure, Lincoln has used similar tactics in the past, but he has a moral compass, and never lets things go too far, and is always endeavoring to make things right if he does. He's a kid, he makes mistakes, but he never lets those things control his psyche. Imagine if he gave in to his resentment and his selfishness came back in full force. This movie can almost be seen as a macrocosm of making the case. Imagine if Lincoln decided to throw his sisters under the bus for that big, shiny trophy instead of making things right. Much lower stakes, but it shows that his moral compass is the big kicker that separates the two, and as we've seen, he's learned to shed those more selfish qualities while Morag just gave in to them. Morag takes one last jab at his insecurities, telling him that he'll never be special, that he's destined to be cast into the shadows. But this time, he holds strong and focuses on the qualities that he brings to the table, and it's his confidence and magician tricks that allows him, with the help of Lily too, to pull a switcheroo and get the Dragonstone out of Morag's hands. It's promptly destroyed, and Morag makes one last-ditch effort to recover the crown. Leela comes to the rescue and the day is saved, and Lincoln will be remembered as the loudest of the Louds. Lincoln is presented with the crown, but ultimately hesitates. He reflects on his time in Loch, with the crown symbolizing what it could do for him, but realizes that it clouded his attitude and made him forget who he was and what he can do for others. Thus, Lincoln decides to crown Angus as the Duke Regent, seeing him as the one best fit to rule Loch. He has the mindset and knowledge, and one of the qualities of a good leader is knowing when to hand the wheel over to someone more capable. The teacher who told Lincoln throughout the movie not to doubt himself is now questioning his own worthiness. It makes for an interesting role reversal that tests what everyone has learned from the experience, but the townspeople and even the spirits of the old Louds themselves voice their support for Angus. Meanwhile, Lincoln's siblings admire him for the decision he made, and reaffirm him that he's just as special as they are, and hit home that core quality of Lincoln's character, that he leads the charge and takes care of them, just like Angus takes care of the people of Loch, all the way to the bitter end. Scotland really has a way of carving a man down to his true self. As for Morag, well, her fate's in Leela's hands. I guess the one concern of Angus's tenure as Duke Regent is that he's too forgiving. This attempted murderer is now the groundskeeper of Loud Castle, but under Leela's watchful eye. It also shows that Angus never really gave up on her, and hopes to see her turn over a new leaf, even after all she's put the town through. As a new day dawns, Lincoln, Angus, and the rest of the Louds work together to rebuild the town in a musical montage, and have a fun get-together before finally heading home. We even get some fun little interactions between Lincoln and Angus. It really feels like he sees Angus as family, even if they aren't related by blood. It's his virtues that make him an honorary Loud, which is why the Netflix exclusivity contract was in a way a double-edged sword. According to the terms, they aren't allowed to reference events and characters from the movie in outside media for a period of 5 years post-airing. The most we see is what seems to be a picture of Loud Castle's entrance in For Sale by Loner next season. Nickelodeon All-Star Brawl 2 managed to get around this, though it's possible that the contract didn't take video games into account. I'll Miss Ya Lad ends up being really on the nose. We have yet to see him get any acknowledgement in the subsequent seasons. Looking back, Lincoln goes through a very Sokka-esque character arc. Both of the tacticians of their respective groups who go through feelings of inadequacy feel that they're the guy in their group that's regular among a gang of talented superstars. Each even get a moment of belittlement from another group member who they're otherwise close to. They set off on a trip to find their purpose and talent, and under the guidance of a caring mentor, they go through an experience that both generates new talents and makes them realize their role in the group, being the leader that everyone looks up to come up with clever solutions and effective plans. And in Lincoln's case, the movie alone gives us a lot of show-don't-tell showcasing of Lincoln's expertise in that regard. They're both able to truly see their self-worth. Granted, Sokka doesn't have a parallel to Lincoln's desire to be in the spotlight. He's a teenager who is forced to mature faster than normal, so he's not always the one to get caught up in the moment. With some exceptions. It's not like Lincoln doesn't have his own accomplishments to look back on either. Winning the Double Dare in a savvy comic competitions, being on the yearbook committee, proving Lenny innocent and saving her job. Many times he led the charge when the siblings had a goal to accomplish. Even in a messier outing like Kings of the Con, despite not getting the recognition he deserved, these are still his characters getting the spotlight, being officially inducted into the A-Savvy canon no less. These won't always get him put on the front of a newspaper, but it shows that he does have talent, even if it isn't a marketable gimmick or shtick that'll get him loads of online fans like, say, Luna or Lucy. He's come to accept himself, and that's what matters most. And that's what this movie brings to the table. It's a touching and feel-good adventure with epic moments and plenty of substance. A great piece of media for both kids and fans of the show alike. It's not gunning for a big Oscar nomination, nor is it trying to be a discussion generator like The Simpsons, but there's nothing wrong with that. Not every film needs to make some kind of big statement. It's okay to just be a good time with a lot of heart. I can understand why one might be turned off by some of the movie's more out-there elements, like the premise or the fantasy inclusions, but that doesn't mean that it deserves the negative reputation it has. They clearly put a lot of love into this. But what do you think? Did you think the movie was fun, or were you more critical of its ideas? Let me know in the comments and be sure to pack your school bag. Season 5 is on its way.